So it turns out that we've discovered what kind of Islam the British Caliphate will be following.
Right.
Sunni Islam.
Right.
We found this out recently because of a filming of a Shia film called Lady of Heaven, and the Sunni activists protested, got it shut down, which we'll go through in a minute, and no one in our government objected at all.
Well, nobody, as I was saying to you before we came on, there wasn't even a kind of platitudinous kind of response. I think there are two things I would say, actually, Carl. There were nothing from the government. You kind of expect that now. You do kind of expect that. But then on the other hand, considering this is, if you like, a creative endeavour, you would think that some actors or some writers
the arts
arts world would come out and sort of say this is a great worry to us or something like that, however lame, but nothing.
And do you remember what the response to Salman Rushdie was with the Satanic Verses?
Well, I sort of do. I remember some of it was shameful.
Yes.
I remember, I think, I don't want to misname anyone, but there was somebody who said, actually, a public intellectual said, it's outrageous what he's done. Frankly, he gets what he deserves and everything. That was, I think, when a bit of a kind of benchmark was set, because it went ahead and it proved, therefore, successful. Salman Rushdie was under a fatwa.
Yep.
And he was basically living in hiding for 10 years, something like that.
It was a very long time.
A long time. Yeah. And since then, we've had issues, not just in this country, whether it's Charlie Hebdo, whether it's whatever it is, come up every so often. And it's basically extremely important that they're resisted. I'd say the only reason that it doesn't seem to happen more is that we've now got a great sort of self-censorship going on.
Yes. I mean, at least during the days of Salman Rushdie in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a public discussion about it.
Yeah, yeah.
At least you had voices on either side saying, well, hang on a second, aren't we a tolerant nation who believe in free speech? But now we just have silence. But anyway, before we go on, we're actually hiring at lotus.com. We want video content presenters to come and work here. So if you are interested in that, go to lotus.com/careers. Check out the job description. You'll need to produce written and video content for the website. So if you've got something to say and you're very clever and have lots of interesting things that you think would be interesting for the people who watch us, do apply. We'd like to hear from you. Anyway, so Lady of Heaven is a film which we can call a Shiite film. Now, I'm not an expert in Islamic theology or historiography or any of it really, but as I understand it, there is a schism in the Islamic world between Sunni and Shiite. The Sunnis believe that one political faction were the legitimate successors and the actual successors to Muhammad and the various rightly guided caliphs, and then you had a second faction who believe, I think it's the grandson, Ali, who was wrongly done during this succession, and the Shiite faction believe that he should have been the successor and wasn't. It's like, right. So the schism in this is, as I understand it, a political schism from 1,400 years ago. Very important. But the problem with Lady of Heaven is that it presents the Shiite narrative on the succession and on the people. Now, I dread to comment on a film I haven't seen, but I mean, where would I go to see it?
Well, why not? Everyone else is.
Exactly.
There are people saying that this is blasphemous. We have what was it? One of the protesters said something like, "We have a right not to be offended. We have a right not to be."
I've got all the clips. We'll go through all of that in a second, if you don't mind.
So basically, yes, in a way, Carl, I mean, I think, your understanding of the political schism is obviously entirely correct. However, I think that the general principle here sort of almost overrides it. I mean, it almost doesn't matter what it's about. I mean,
No, you are absolutely right. It doesn't matter what it's about because they don't know what it's about. But what they know is it's, as you say, blasphemous, but politically blasphemous. And that's, I think, a very interesting aspect of Islam, is that there is no separating the religious tenet from the political tenet. And that's concerning if you live in, say, a secular country where there should be a distinction between the public and the private. But anyway, I'll move on. So the film was banned in Iran, Pakistan, and Egypt already, and it apparently tells the story of Laith, an Iraqi child in the middle of a war-torn country. After losing his mother, finds himself in a new home with an elderly woman who tells him the story of Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, from the Shia perspective. Now, this was not greeted well, generally. On the 2nd of June, there were protests, lots of protests, all around England. In Blackburn, there was a silent protest. Now, that I thought was an interesting step. Never heard of a silent protest by Muslims before.
Why particularly, actually?
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know why it was silent, but 25 people turned up to View Cinemas in Blackburn to hold a silent protest. None of the group holding banners, but simply wanted to have their feelings known to the cinema chain, which, honestly, I think that's entirely respectable. I mean, you could have spoken, as far as I'm concerned. You could have had banners, but they, peaceful, quiet protest. Say, look, we're not happy with this. That's fine. And a spokesperson said that the film wouldn't be shown and would be pulled. Okay. The problem that they are addressing is that apparently it contains the Prophet Muhammad's face. Now,
computer generated, not a person.
That's correct, because it might have been a bit dangerous for a person to portray Muhammad. But the thing is, for Shia Islam, it's not wrong to portray the Prophet Muhammad, because they don't think of him as a god, and they don't have a prescription on it. It's actually very stringent aspects of Sunni Islam that have a prohibition on portraying the Prophet Muhammad. And you can find lots of medieval imagery of Muhammad because it just wasn't wrong a few hundred years ago. This is a very modern phenomenon. And so the critics have gone on about this, saying, well, it's the depictions of Abu Bakr, Umar, the wife of the Prophet, Umar and the wife of the Prophet Aisha, and other characters were black.
Right.
And that was blasphemous. The Prophet Muhammad famously had a very pale face. Very interesting how that... and this is something we'll get into in a minute. But anyway, so this was something that caused a great deal of problems. So now, in Blackburn, it was a silent protest, but in Bradford, it wasn't. And I thought we'd watch a few of the clips. Let's play this first one.
And furthermore, just to make the wider audience understand, we are very offended. As you can see, we are very insulted, and we have a right not to be insulted. You talk about freedom of speech, but where does your freedom of speech go? When it goes to criticizing your policies, when it goes to making critical analysis of your version of history. Let me give you one example before I finish. If you look in certain countries in Europe, it is forbidden to criticize the Holocaust or to even make a critical analysis whether this event actually occurred in the way that they portray it, or whether there are discrepancies in the version of this story. Where does your freedom of speech go then?
When you look at that, the reasoning behind it,
It's like a child.
it's extraordinary. And I mean, this particular guy's using our values, if you like, using our freedoms against us.
Yep.
That is the point, I think. And one hears these kind of arguments all the time. You cannot compare what is happening now with what he said there about the Holocaust or whatever. The fact is, it seems to me that they interpret free speech as somehow being the right to be able to prohibit. This is extraordinary. You mentioned Cineworld, and people said, well, because when I talked about this on the New Culture Forum yesterday, and people sort of came back saying, well, you can understand, the guy's got, or the Cineworld people have got to think of their staff, security, and all of that. I do understand that. Yeah. I'm not stupid. I get that. But I do think that the time is coming, you sort of think, well, actually, Cineworld, just hire huge amounts of security then. Keep going.
But why is it that the police aren't involved?
I saw not one policeman in any of these clips.
But what's interesting about this is, first off, notice how he's conflating all of Europe with England. Yeah. In the UK, it's not actually illegal to deny the Holocaust. You are actually legally allowed. The problem, if you can get the next link up, is how you go about it. Yeah. Now, there's this lady here. Can you scroll down? I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But scroll down a bit because it says her name. Azan Chablos, right? She is a singer and blogger who has made lots of songs that are very offensive towards Jews. And so she was arrested under the Malicious Communication Act, Section 127. So it's not that she is denying the Holocaust, it's that she is being racially offensive online. So it's her communication method of putting out her opinion, not actually denying the Holocaust. Of course, in places like Germany, then yes, it is illegal to deny the Holocaust. But notice how our Muslim friend here is conflating all of Europe with England. He doesn't draw the distinction there. Where's your freedom of speech go? Well, I don't think they have freedom of speech in Germany. They're a very curated country. And so it's interesting how he's conflating them with us. One could say that was racist, in fact.
Yes.
But also, is that the hill he wants to die on? We're going to shut down this film because I can't deny the Holocaust.
I think that this is just of a piece.
Yeah.
You know, whether it is comedians, whether it is films, whether it is literary novels such as the Satanic Verses, I think that whatever the nuances of, and I know that they are important, whatever the nuances of the particular case, the overriding thing is you are not going to be allowed to criticize Islam.
Yes.
Simple as that.
All represent a different version of things.
Yes, or indeed, for that
not even criticism.
And also, for that matter, you know, a kind of get some sort of unofficial blasphemy law going.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, we don't have that in this country now. What we do have is far too many people who see this in kind of racial terms. You know, they see it as, oh, this is race. In fact, I think some of the protesters use this now. It's almost like they've cottoned on to this kind of cancel culture thing.
I will actually go into that in a second. But again, I find it fascinating. We have a right not to be offended. Who told you that?
Yes, exactly.
Where did you get that from?
Exactly. It's, no, there is not a right not to be offended or
There
insulted.
couldn't be.
Look,
Right.
for me, you know, look, I grew up at least, I remember going to see Life of Brian, right? And it's interesting, looking at some of the comments that I got yesterday, people saying, oh, what are you talking about, Life of Brian? There were, you know, demonstrations about that and it was banned, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, no, right? I was there, I'm old enough. You know, the fact is, I remember going to see the Life of Brian. I was at Canterbury University at the time, and Canterbury, of course, is the premier church town of England.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Canterbury Cathedral, and even there, actually, it was being shown at the cinema. And this has become Life of Brian. Yes, there were demonstrations, rather quiet ones. There were demonstrations. It was not banned. A few cinemas banned it, but it's become part of our popular kind of folklore.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the song. Everyone still laughs at the jokes. He's a very naughty boy. All of that, you know.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And all of this, you know, that would be unimaginable, obviously, if you're talking about Islam.
No, it couldn't
unimaginable. That is the crux of it. And that's what we have to say. Are you happy with that? Well, I'm not.
No, it's disgraceful. But you are exactly right as well when you say they're using our own values against us. Let's play this next clip.
Personality, the blessed personality of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, who is near and dear to our hearts. This is extremely wrong and disparaging, because our belief is that there is none like him and none ever will be like him. Therefore, it's an insult to him to try to depict him and act his role. Secondly, the roles of the noble caliphs of Islam being acted out by black people. Now, this is not only an insult to the caliphs by negatively portraying them, you know, by using black people. It's also an insult to the black people, the African people, that they use those people who they perceive as the baddies in their eyes, they use black people for that role. So that's a very negative thing as well and very racist.
Oh, that's very racist.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, it's quite extraordinary. You know, Carl, what, the past few years or whatever, you know, one can be hugely insulted. I'm insulted when statues come down.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm insulted when, you know, our institutions, or the ones that I still think are valuable, are, you know, degraded and insulted. All of this, you know, you live with it. You know, you live with it in a liberal democracy, right? And this is the crux of the matter, actually, is that there seems to be no understanding, at least with these protesters. I don't know how widely these views are held amongst the Islamic community. I don't think anybody does, actually.
I doubt very much that these people have spent a lot of time studying the British values you're speaking of, though. But I just find it fascinating. It's insulting to portray them as black people because that's demeaning to the Caliph and his sons, but it's also demeaning to the black people because they're being portrayed as villains, but the Caliph isn't the villain. Like the rightly guided caliphs are the heroes of the story. So his messaging there is very confused, but it implies that they view these people being played as black people as demeaning to them because of them being
it's
black.
almost like they're just going to they're using almost every bit
They're
of
trying,
unreason.
Yes, they're absolutely trying. So that's something I disavow, obviously. And this clip is just perfect because it shows you the depth of understanding that these people have about this film, about the situation, and about, well, anything that's going on. Let's play it.
With a single announcement from Maulana Abdul Halim Sahab, so many people have left their jobs and so many people have left their work and so many people have left whatever they were doing and united here, standing in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the name of our Sahaba, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. Many of us standing here, we don't even know what the movie is about. We don't even know what's being shown on the screen inside. We heard that somebody is defaming the Sahaba Kiram Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. Somebody is trying to defame Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You are needed here, you left everything and you turned up here.
They don't even know why they're there.
Yeah. Well, also, if we were some nice sort of BBC liberal channel doing this at the moment, what would we be discussing actually? We'd be saying, where are the women? Wouldn't we?
Well, that's a great question. Where are the women? Indeed. I don't know. I think that would be Islamophobic to query that. So maybe we would just be self-censoring and holding our tongues on that issue. But I don't doubt that we would be thinking it very loudly. But isn't that just fascinating, though? There's just literally hundreds of them have turned up. We don't know why we're here. We haven't seen the film. But we were told someone is defaming the Prophet. Maybe. I mean, who knows? You don't know what you're doing. You've turned up like an angry mob. This is like Pakistani tribal politics that has been imported into Bradford. You don't know anything about this.
Yes. No, I think, but also one of the characteristics of many of these kind of things when they come along, I certainly think it was the case with the satanic verses, is that it sort of spread from country to country and was obviously stirred up as well. But of course, I'm sure the majority of people protesting probably hadn't read the satanic verses. It's sort of not
It's a moral panic, isn't it? That's the thing. And this is what we're looking at here, a moral panic by people who literally can't control their own feelings. They're not in control of their own feelings. So watch this next clip.
You should be listening to us. You are affecting the feelings of 1 billion Muslims around the entire world. You are hurting our feelings. You are not taking us into consideration. If you don't take us into consideration, at least you should have taken into consideration those Muslims, the feelings of those Muslims who day and night come and serve you inside there. Cineworld is only built and is only going upon the wealth of the Muslims. How many non-Muslims you seen going there? It is us Muslims, it is our wealth, it is our time that is being spending there and financially helping this place. Therefore, we have a legal right. We have a legal right to stand here and to express our hurtful feelings, that you have hurt our feelings.
Well, I mean, he's probably technically right that people do have a right to protest and demonstrate, outside of cinema, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely not the point. They immediately the protesters make the kind of leap that somehow this should not therefore be allowed.
Yeah, and that's the sum total of his objection. What's happened? You've hurt our feelings? So? Don't care. Not my problem.
What has struck me about this particular incident this time, Carl, is the speed with which it's happened.
Oh, yeah.
That it happened, we had some demos, we had the fellow who's, I believe, just a manager in Bolton of a cinema coming out and saying, it's not going to be shown, and I'm with you, etc. And then Cineworld actually sort of pulled it very, very quickly. So, but it's been, I think, characterized by that, but also by, as we said at the beginning, the lack of pushback from anyone.
It's been nothing.
Lack of pushback. If you can imagine, I remember when, for example, there was something called Jerry Springer the Opera, and there was some depiction, this was 15 years ago now, of Jesus in it. And basically a lot of people found it very, very objectionable, but the BBC still showed it, and they sort of felt they were standing up for something. But you don't see that when it comes to Islam.
They wouldn't even dare. But this chap who we just heard ranting and raving is going to explain to us why he's ranting and raving. Let's launch.
If somebody came and they took away my parents, I wouldn't feel like this. If somebody came and burnt my house down, I wouldn't feel like this. If somebody come and took my children, wallahi lazim, I would never ever feel like this. But coming and attacking the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a derogatory manner, I can't explain my feelings. You will have to look inside my heart, and you will have to see what is going on inside my heart to know what is happening inside my heart. Allahu Akbar. Words cannot describe it. My feelings are all over the place. My mind is all over the place. That how can somebody come and attack the beloved wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
He hasn't seen the film.
But I mean, this is how can someone come and attack? There was a piece of artwork done, again, about 10, 20 years ago, called Piss Christ.
Yes.
Now, as it happens, I'm quite agnostic, right? But, it was a crucifix covered in urine, right? You could say that is an extremely offensive thing.
I imagine many Christians did find it extremely offensive.
But the fact of the matter is, it existed, it wasn't pulled down, it is one of those things that you live with in a country like ours. If that guy is sincere, we just heard, because there's a possibility that he's, bigging it up, then there is a lack of understanding there.
Yeah.
Serious.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, notice, I just can't get over this. I can't control my feelings. I don't want to say it's womanly, but it's very feminine. It's very, very feminine from men who otherwise would, I imagine, tout their masculine credentials. To sit there and say, I'm not in control of my feelings, I'm about to swoon like a woman. Just like, aren't you embarrassed?
Yes,
I would be terribly embarrassed to say something like that in public.
Well, as I said, I mean, if this were the BBC, that would be probably the headline quote, how dare you talk swoon like a woman? This is misogyny.
Well, yes. and Islamophobia. But anyway, so let's just carry on. These are the sorts of people. But the thing is, as you were saying, right, they will make any kind of artwork that debauches Jesus Christ. They don't care about that. They don't care about Christians. Because underpinning the protests when the Christians are out there with their placards or with their objections, there isn't a sense of intimidation. There isn't a sense that, well, actually, if you don't do as we say, someone might get hurt. Well, at the Birmingham protest at least, let's play this clip and see if we get the same feeling.
Birmingham will not tolerate the disrespect of our Prophet, peace be upon him, and there will be outcomes from your actions. You will have repercussions for your actions. We have been trained from birth that we must defend the honor of our Prophet, and we will lay our life on the line. Is
that not a threat of violence?
That's pretty chilling.
It's pretty chilling over a film at a cinema that you don't like. I mean, a lot of this is like a Nando's in the background or something. It's like, mate, where do you think you are? Like, what do you think you're doing? You're just a public embarrassment. But anyway,
I think your point, Carl, about basically, if it were a Christian thing, there wouldn't be, the threat of violence wouldn't be taken seriously if indeed there were a threat of violence, which I very much doubt, because it never has really been. I think on top of that, what I would suggest is that the general cultural and political establishment, they see Christianity as kind of the oppressor religion.
It's the hegemonic religion.
So, yes. So basically, that's why, just to widen this a little bit, the mainstream media is often criticised, quite rightly, for not really covering the persecution of Christians around the world.
Not even slightly.
People just don't know about it, and one of the reasons being is, I think, it's just not as important to editors, producers, reporters. It's just not, it's somehow or other, it is, because it's us, if you like, traditionally speaking, that therefore somehow we should almost expect it.
For some reason, it's not important to say the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Pope or anyone else to speak out about the bombings of Coptic Christians or the eradication of Christians in Iraq and places like this. It's just not important to them for some reason. Ancient, like Christian sites that are more ancient than anything in Europe are being destroyed in the Middle East, and no one cares. It's like, right, okay, well, I guess we don't care, because anyway, Christianity must be cancelled, like this film was cancelled. This is the manager of this Sheffield cinema, saying, yes, we've cancelled it. Aren't you pleased with me? Let's watch.
As the manager of this cinema, I'm confirming that we've cancelled this film and will not be showing it again. We value you as customers. Listen! We value you all as our customers. We're in the heart of this community. At a local level, it wasn't our decision to show this film, it came from above. We totally agree with what you're saying.
Thank you, sir.
We are not prepared at this cinema to show this film.
Allahu Akbar.
You know, it's very alarming to see a clip like that. Does the guy actually mean this, or is he just saying what he thinks is kind of going to keep his staff safe, or whatever? But even so, it's the craven quality.
It's disgusting, isn't it? I mean, notice how he said we're at the heart of this community. And the other one, the protester said, well, we come and spend our money here. This is built on Muslim money. And it just goes to show you the demographics of the areas in which these people are protesting. Enclave, I think, is a generous way of putting it, because it's not like these people have adopted any kind of British custom. They're dressed in, foreign Islamic dress. They're chanting Allahu Akbar, and they're protesting about a sectarian schism that has come to our shores. What a great idea mass immigration was. Anyway, so just to cap this off, Cineworld cancelled all screenings, of course, because they were terrified. They said literally, quote, to ensure the safety of our staff and customers. Worrying, that, I would say. Nothing to talk about here, though, I suppose. So yes, that was... there was the Bolton Council of Mosques called the film blasphemous and underpinned with sectarian ideology. The film's producer is a man called Malik Schlibach, I think, and he says no one should dictate for the British public what they can and cannot watch or discuss, describing the protesters as fringe groups. It's like, well, I mean, I agree with you, Malik, but the thing is, I'm not sure they're fringe groups.
Carl, can you tell me, because I don't watch broadcast news anymore.
Well, neither do I.
Oh, you don't?
Well, as little as possible.
I just wondered whether this had been covered. I know it has in the papers, but...
Very, very tepidly. So the only thing that I really saw talking about this was James O'Brien, amazingly, on LBC, who called this Sunni fragility, which, I mean, yes, James, but they're also, they don't care. Like he said, if you really believe in an all-powerful divine being, I'm fairly confident that he or she is going to be supremely relaxed about a film. It's like, no, they don't believe that, James. They don't believe that. They believe that that's blasphemous, and actually, they do some pretty terrible things to blasphemers in certain religious Muslim countries around the world. They're not like you, who is an atheist, clearly. They don't think that way. They genuinely have these as a sincere conviction. And you can say, well, it just shows how fragile their belief structures are. So, yeah, well, I'm sure they'd give a damn while they were doing terrible things to blasphemers, as if they care. But the only politician I could find who had made any comment about this at all was Sajid Javid.
All right.
One tepid statement on the telephone to Julie Hartley-Brewer, saying he is, quote, very concerned. We don't have blasphemy laws. That would be a dangerous road to go down. Saj, you've got massive mobs of Muslim men who are threatening in a subtle way violence over a film based on sectarian conflict within the Islamic world. I think we're already there.
Exactly. This is point. This will be a dangerous road to go down. The implication all the time is that this is something that might happen in the future.
It's happening right now.
Yes. Also, actually, you might say, well, what difference does it make? But they've got him on. But where is our Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport? Where, in fact, for that matter, is Prime Minister? I mean, whether this takes me back rather to 2 years ago during the BLM thing, and how long did it take for Boris Johnson to actually say anything about this?
Yeah.
Whatever you think of President Macron, he came right out and said, we do not tolerate statues being torn down in France. They are not coming down. It's French history for good or bad, right? You need, when you have a cultural onslaught like this going on, you need your central politicians to just reassure people, even to say, I'm on your side, I don't agree either, but we just don't get this. And I think, I don't mean to preempt what we're going to talk about, but
No.
I just think that the Tory party, well, it's all kind of like got its head up its arse at the moment because of the leadership thing. But at the same time, even if that weren't happening, I just don't think they quite understand the real nature of the cultural onslaught we have.
I don't know what the Conservative Party is anymore. It just seems to be an empty shell that exists because people don't want to vote for communism. Like, what's the purpose? I mean, like, Sajid Javid is a Pakistani Muslim man. So he was allowed to, I imagine there was a meeting, where Boris was like, well, you're going to have to do it, Saj.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do it because you know why, you go tell them that's bad. And that's it. Yeah. And it's like, okay, but can we not have a bit of moral leadership? Because, I mean, like, at the end of the day, if this is a widespread opinion in the Muslim community in Britain, they're going to have to learn to knock it off. We're not, we can't have that. And yet, here we are. But anyway, this mob is, of course, going after other cinemas. The View cinemas haven't yet cancelled it, as I understand it, but I imagine they will. I prepared this yesterday, so it may have updated since then. But there we go.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can become a member and find all of our premium content on lotuseaters.com, including the latest Critical Base Theory number 10, The Problem with the Reified Right, done by Thomas Dowling. And if you're interested in finding Tom on social media, you can follow him on Getter at Thomas W. Dowling. Thank you and goodbye.